progress through Lent, our progress, our growth in the Spirit. We are now in the second week of Lent. And today I want you to use a passage of St. Luke's Gospel. You'll find it in chapter 19 of St. Luke's Gospel, the very first little incident of that chapter. Perhaps as you're sitting in front of your computer screen now, you may sit back in your chair, put your back against the rest, close your eyes, and just visualize the scene. Jesus was coming into the town of Jericho. Jericho is down by the River Jordan. So as he approached the town, over to the left, over towards the river, the land is wonderfully fertile. Beautiful orange trees laden with fruit. The vegetables as they grow in the grass are intensely green. Everything is well watered and fruitful. Over to the right-hand side of the road, you begin to get the scrub land of the desert. But that's where people live. Their houses are there, not in straight rows, but just houses dotted here and there. And it formed a town. And Jesus was entering into the town. There was a crowd gathered around him. And one man had a particular urgency to see Jesus. He was very disturbed in his life. He was very uncomfortable with himself, very unhappy with his life. There was deep sadness about him. St. Luke tells us that he was very small in stature. And so he got the notion that he could move into the town where there was a large tree, a sycamore tree, God's gift to young boys, because it's got branches coming out at every angle. It's easy to climb. It has big leaves, and you can hide up there. And Zacchaeus, this grown man, decided that he would become a little boy for that day, and he would climb into the tree as Jesus passed. St. Luke tells us that he was the chief tax collector. Jericho was a big traveled place, so the taxes were levied there by many, many of the Roman tax collectors. And we know, of course, that Jewish tax collectors were excluded from the Jewish community because they worked for the enemy. One has to ask the question, why is it that Zacchaeus would choose to be excluded, to be ostracized, to be hated, to leave his people, even to leave God, in order to do that particular job? There had to be something very profound in his life that caused that change. And it must be in the fact that he was so small. And when he went to the rabbi school, the other boys, as boys do, constantly joked at him and poked fun at him, and the bigger ones knocked him about a little bit because he was so small. They called him nasty names like tiny and runt and other insulting things of that nature. And he decided he would get his own back on these people. And he would join the tax collecting corps. And he did. He was very observant, probably. And he knew just exactly how many chickens everybody had. And when they declared 10, he knew it was 15, and he marked it down, and he made them pay. That was what he wanted to do. He wanted to make them pay as they bullied him. And he did. And being good at his job, he rose in the ranks. Now, as the leading tax collector, he's very unhappy. Because it gave him money, the job, gave him status, but it didn't bring him home. And he wasn't home among the people. He couldn't find home even in his own heart, because he was torn in two. And he wondered about this man, Jesus. And so he hid himself in the tree, and the crowd slowly came towards him. And he watched and he watched. He picked out Jesus in the crowd, the stranger in their midst. He looked at him. And then eventually, as Jesus grew close, Jesus looked up at him. He was a sinner. He was an outcast. He was a threat to the people. But Jesus looked at him and kindly said, "Zacchaeus, come down. Today I must eat in your house." And it just changed Zacchaeus' heart. He came down, invited his friends to dinner and to Jesus, and he declared publicly that he would give back anything that he had taken over and above what was right, and he would pay fourfold for anything that he had taken, because he had received an invitation from Jesus to become one with Jesus. In Lent, Jesus gives an invitation to each one of us, an invitation to start on a spiritual journey. It will require that we make a change in our life. It may not be as violent as that which happened to Zacchaeus, but we do need to make a change in your life. The great good news is that Jesus is inviting us. And wherever Jesus invites us, he gives us the power to become part of his life. That meal which Jesus celebrated with Zacchaeus in the Gospel, as it's told, is in the context of the Eucharist. Jesus invited Zacchaeus, the sinner, to the Eucharist. He invites us to the Eucharist, and we are also sinners. But inviting us to share his meal, he gives us the power to change. And in that change, he gives us power. He gives us the joy of life. Zacchaeus, you see, had been so unhappy, so discontented, so miserable. But from that moment onwards, he found life as it should be lived. Life is to be lived in Jesus. That is our prayer for this week. Thank you.